future of work is a phrase that has been used as a soundbite by academics and business practitioners for decades, as organizations have tried to navigate economic and socio-political existential conditions and to pin down how the workplace and everything related to it would change from one point in time to another. Technologies, globalization, mobility, and evolving attitudes have in the past all tended to shape the nature of most discussions on the future of work. The pandemic exacted a toll to one extent or another on business organizations globally, leaving a lasting impact on labor demand, mix of occupations, and notions of what constitutes expected and relevant workforce skills and attitudes shaped by the pandemic experience. If the C-suite can articulate clearly what it needs or wants to see in a future world of work, HR could link these to effective training and development practices, relevant job descriptions and specifications, tenable compensation and reward systems, and more. So it is, with this in mind, that on behalf of the Board of Directors of HERMAT, all its committees, that I take the opportunity to welcome all of you today to C-Suite, the future world of work. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm inviting to the podium to give the President's opening address, the President of HERMAT, Cavell Joseph St. Ulmer. Put your hands together for her, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinguished honor and privilege to welcome you to our first in-person event in 3 years, HERMAT C-Suite Conversations, the Future of Work. With the advent of the fourth industrial revolution, the world of work is in a state of flux, changing as never before, driven by inexorable forces that are impacting manufacturing and trade, global supply chains, and digitalization of the global economy, to name just a few. We are also witnessing the great resignation in some parts of the world and increasing job loss globally. It is undeniable that many jobs today will be automated tomorrow, with profound consequences for people, particularly women and the youth, who will face shrinking job opportunities. But as we look to the future, we must do so from a range of perspectives and situations that place the well-being of people at the front and center of the agenda. It is in this context HERMAT's inaugural C-Suite Conversations Future of Work was developed to provide a unique opportunity for us to catalyze a constructive, participatory dialogue and to gather our thoughts and possibly evidence as we harness the expertise needed to address the emerging trends and shape the transformation occurring in the world of work. The launch, as well as the initiative itself, because we intend to have future C-Suite conversations, it provides an opportunity for us to share our collective knowledge and expertise into the future of work. The truth is, challenge and uncertainty have become constant. That is the reality. Who could have foreseen at the end of 2019, and when we all sat and toasted on December 31st, ushering in 2020, that we would have embarked on what would have been a home working revolution, almost like a case study. And particularly with these changes happening without a period of careful planning or any long lead time. In fact, for many of us, the changes happen, if not overnight, certainly within the space of a few weeks. I am certain for a number of you, the majority of your staff have worked from home since 2020, and that is March 2020. This is in great contrast to how we actually worked previous to the pandemic. As we look to the future and we leave lockdown behind, we leave restrictions and the mask behind, we have an exciting and unique opportunity. The challenge, although daunting, is to learn from the many successes we have collected over the past 2 years and to use them as a springboard to build more effective, collaborative, and flexible organizations. Our staff actually deserves this and demands this of us. But the increased demand for enhanced flexibility has not occurred purely because of the pandemic. This had been starting before, helped by the development of the internet, software-based tools that our organizations are now built upon, which have already alleviated the absolute requirement for us all to work together in the same place at the same time. But the pandemic acted as an accelerator for change, forcing us to make the transition before we otherwise would have done it. It is against this backdrop, as well as the speed by which change has occurred and has been it's been daunting and unsettling for many of us. It is not clear what the new normal will look like. But I do believe that organizations that fail to embrace the profound changes that have occurred will be left behind. The world of work is changing, thanks to at least 4 critical medium and long-term structural factors, which now more than ever is influencing content and nature and the way we organize work. That is 1, technology drivers, exponential growth in processing power, bandwidth, and data storage are putting unprecedented capabilities in the hands of individuals and taking machine capabilities to levels which is unmatched and transcend human capacity in many domains. Social shifts, increasing expectations of participation, flexibility, and what actually is the meaning of this changing relationship between individuals and organizations and the concept of work. Demographic shifts and increasing pressures on governments and social structures, changing the relationship between workers and particularly for the elderly. Structure. In a networked world, the structure of businesses has evolved, creating fundamental change. Latent availability is emerging to be matched by latent demand, creating new markets based on bringing together diverse connections. And finally, work. What is work? We're talking the future of work. There are 2 critical drivers changing in terms of work: connectivity and machine capabilities. As we are connected, almost any work can be done anywhere in any part of the world, with richer interfaces enabling greater comfort with remote work and the ability to perform physical labor. Increased capability of robots and computers are matching and moving beyond those the human could see in common places, and in some cases it may even seem or appear to be destroying jobs. There's a potential for these forces to reduce employment and polarize work opportunities. However, we can also envisage and create a future of work in which job creation exceeds job destruction, and we make work increasingly human, tapping our expertise, creativity, and aptitude for relationships to create a more prosperous world for all of us. So I rationalize that to confront some of these significant shifts, policy responses are absolutely necessary. Institutions will need to be much more ambitious in providing enhanced access to lifelong learning and educational opportunities, to inform investment decisions on education and skills, as well as to inform individual career choices in an ongoing challenging environment. It is essential to rely in real time and finely tune a more holistic data capture to inform these decisions. Informal and online learning will also grow in prominence, and policies should be prepared to channel and stimulate it properly. The education sector will need to closely work with the business sector to ensure that programs are developed and continuously updated to meet the future skills requirement. And critical to avoiding structural unemployment will be public support for enabling job transitions and mobility. Depending on the market impact, social protection schemes and benefits may be created or developed further to respond to these new realities without creating a strain or a sustainability issue or cost to businesses. At the same time, the evolution of the labor market will need proper follow-up based on a collection of appropriate labor market statistics and provide policymakers with information on recent developments and how these are affecting the employment relationship. The reality is, to harness the momentum of the digital era, Many economies will have to improve access to both the internet and new digital tools sustainably, and because these are the drivers, these will provide new income opportunities and growth opportunities. However, the digital economy also requires strong regulatory framework that creates a vibrant business climate and lets business leverage digital technologies and compete in an innovative way. So, as we talk further on the future world of work, most of us HR practitioners know getting and retaining good jobs has always been one of the most important lifelong objectives of the majority of people across diverse geographies, cultures, and demographics. A job allows individuals to participate in society, to contribute to their community, and to generate income to support themselves and their dependents. In addition, for many people, jobs are an important part of their identity. While a number of jobs in the economy seems to be on the decline, the future does seem to promise an abundance of work. It's all about perspective. But work may not always resemble the traditional jobs in the way in which it was organized and executed. Rather, it may be more task-based. Work may fulfill some aspects of a job, such as provide benefits to meet basic needs, but it may leave out elements such as adequate social protection. Thus, it is important for individuals to adapt to a future where job mobility may increase sustainability and to find complementary ways to meet the needs and expectations for a comfortable life going forward. The reality is there are changes to the traditional employment relationship, which calls for reflection on existing regulations to respond and accommodate the new world of work. We must ask ourselves, is the regulatory framework for labor contracts sufficient to deal with the new forms of work? Is it flexible enough to facilitate business and job creation rather than simply obstructing new forms of employment? Technological change, the human cloud offering different skill sets and the ability to work at different costs across different countries, even revolutionizing the traditional employment relationship, that is the reality. The classic dichotomy of an employee and a self-employed person and the basic concept of employment could evenly be at risk, especially when it comes to activities linked to the gig economy. Definitions of employment could become blurred, consequently affecting both employees and employers, leading workers, again, to legal uncertainty. In fact, litigation, if you all are following what's happening in the US and Europe, and in some of the cases there, could actually lead to a whole new jurisprudence as we look at what's happening globally. So companies who are operating in the gig economy have been known to include specific clauses in their agreements that attempt to discharge certain financial responsibilities in the event of subsequent reclassification of the employment relationship. It is therefore important to think about labor market policies and the reforms that are necessary in light of all the evolutions that are taking place. A worker who has worked his whole life in agriculture, for example, cannot simply be shifted to another industry as one sector declines and another rises. Public policies must be geared towards igniting innovation, building skills, empowering people to perform at their best. Ladies and gentlemen, the changing realities of the world of work are affecting different sectors of our economy differently, and we are witnessing the meaning of work being defined in ways that were unknown before. So, how these issues play out will matter hugely for securing job-led and inclusive gross domestic growth. The Human Resource Management Association of Trinidad and Tobago has a mandate of guiding and shaping the conversation and the work required on the future of work. On our way to a new future, I fervently hope that we will tackle forcefully the issues of today. I strongly encourage all stakeholders in the room today to come up with a comprehensive recommendation and novel ideas on how to address the opportunities and challenges of the future. We can all accomplish this by putting people first, by recognizing that labor is more than simply a commodity in the labor market or even just a factor of production. The work is about human beings who have aspirations for themselves, their families, and their communities. Our time to address this issue is actually now. Thank you.
You know her well. She's had numerous experiences, all geared and preparing her for a life of public service. She's a graduate of the University of the West Indies. She's a well-known MP and government minister and a past university lecturer. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Honorable Dr. Nayan Gadsby Dolly, MP, Minister of Education.
Education prepares one for life. And where there is life, there is work. Work and its importance have been established from ancient times. In the Quran, there's a quote that says, "Man will not get anything unless he works hard. One who works is a friend of Allah, and one who does not work is considered by Allah to be his enemy." The Bhagavad Gita. You have a right to perform your prescribed duties, but you are not entitled to the fruits of your actions. Never consider yourself to be the cause of the results of your activities, nor be attached to inaction. And for the Christian community, the well-known words of the Bible, "By the sweat of thy brow shalt thou eat bread." So it is clear the importance of work and civilization is established. And the roots of a formal education system, because we are going back to saying education prepares you for life, and where there's life, there's work. And probably the earliest formal school recorded would have been way back in Egypt, 2061 to 2010 BC. So work and education, inextricably linked always. And therefore, as we consider the future of work, one must consider the future of education. With a West education, how does it maintain relevance? And what exactly are we educating for? These are the questions that face us as policymakers in the education sector. The first challenge is to establish and to grind it into the national psyche where it belongs, that we educate to create the citizens who will drive the upward trajectory of Trinidad and Tobago's development. And once we poise our education sector there, then everything else falls into the place that it should and into perspective. We have consistently, as a country, maintained approximately 9% for quite a few years recently in terms of our national budget devoted to the education sector. That carries us around 5-6 billion based on our national budget annually. It's a big slice of the pie. And even when our budget has reduced, as it would have had to over the years based on external challenges and pressures, our education sector has maintained that percentage. And that speaks to the importance of education to Trinidad and Tobago. We boast of over 850 schools in Trinidad and Tobago. And when we compare ourselves to other nations of similar size and population, especially within the region, we are far ahead in terms of the numbers of schools and institutions that are run by the government. And this reflects itself in the budget that is allocated to the Education Ministry and the importance with which it is viewed in this country. We celebrate our 60th year of independence this year. And way back in 1962, and I'm saying way back, that's not to offend anybody who was there wrong at that time, it's my parents who. But in 1962, when we accepted that mantle, what we said to the world is that we are going to manage ourselves. And a big part of that is tied into our education budget. And why we focus so much on education? Because to be able to manage ourselves, we said to the world that we are going to produce the individuals that will drive our trajectory. So when we speak about the future of work, we said to the world in 1962 that we are going to create the workers in all different spheres and sectors that will drive our trajectory forward. So education and work, the future of work, the future of education, can't get away from linking those things. And therefore, we have moved from the point where we had foreign priests and members of the clergy running schools. Now, where that was once commonplace, we now have our own individuals, homegrown, home-educated in many cases, running these institutions that are the incubators for the world of work. So we have come a long way from where we were, but if we consider the future, we have far to go. Because the external pressures that have been placed upon Trinidad and Tobago and the world, especially by COVID, have made the impetus for us to look more closely at the future of work and therefore the future of education. We have before us Vision 2030, and we will not achieve what is set out before us unless our education sector is linked with the human resources and produces the human resources that are required to be able to achieve that vision. We have to create the citizens that will drive that development. So as we look at that, we consider COVID, we consider what existed before COVID, because even before 2019 and 2020, there were issues that needed to be addressed. And what COVID did was exacerbate that. And so we have to consider the critical skills that our citizens require to live in the world, not just what we teach them in school. What do they need to live? Of course, it goes without saying the digital competence is now critical. And if we think back to how we were educated in school, we would recognize that there must be a transformation in how we teach, in how we examine, and how we allow students to interact with information. Because they need those skills. Those must be second place. In the same way that they are able to write, they must be able to type, to enter data, as well as interact with data, find data. And if we do not give them that practice within the education sector, we put them at a global disadvantage. Cavell mentioned working from home. Working from home requires a certain level of competence, self-direction, self-motivation, self-regulation. And as we train our students in the education sector, these are the skills that we need to give them. This is the opportunity that we need to give them to develop those skills and to guide them along being able to perform in this way. Human resource professionals would understand that there are some people you cannot allow to work from home because they don't work. And there are others who you get more out of if you allow them the flexibility to work from home. So we have in the education sector to develop these skills because this is what will be required as we go forward. Resilience and adaptivity. Young people are by nature resilient. However, we have to formally build that in. They have to understand how to adapt. They have to understand that life does not roll out circumstances that we can always predict, and therefore, we must be able to bounce back if we are faced with challenges. That's what we have to build in our students. Problem solving and the ability to go past a hurdle. Again, important before COVID, but critical now that we are faced with a world that has experienced COVID and who knows what else in the future. How are we poised to deliver this to our citizens? How are we poised to train our young citizens to be able to have these skills that they will require as they join the workforce and become a part of the future of work? You would have heard I think everybody would have heard, and if not now, I will say that the impact of COVID on our performance, our student performance, very, very stark at the SCA level, even at the CXC level, more so CSEC than CAPE. It has been a negative impact, and that's been predicted globally. It's happening globally. And therefore, you are seeing education sectors responding, and also in Trinidad and Tobago, by introducing classes so that our students can make up the loss. Because 2 years lost cannot be simply regained. What we have to do is make more of the time that we have with our students. And this is a great and serious impact on the future of work. Because when we have more students at the SCA level performing under par, I can tell you that there is a close link between SCA performance and CSEC performance. And that should concern us all, because the people we are expecting to be a part of the future of work are the ones that I'm speaking about now. They are the ones that have underperformed. They are the ones that have suffered through COVID. And therefore, our emphasis in the education sector on bringing them up to speed is critical as we consider the world of work and the future of work. These are the persons who will be coming in the next 5 years, in the next 6 years. This is who the workforce will be comprised of. And therefore, when we set your targets in the different industries, these are the persons you would expect to be skilled enough to be able to achieve those targets. And therefore, if at this point they are under par, then we have a lot of work to do. And so, like the rest of the world, what has been our response? We have responded by introducing a vacation program. I can tell you, those who need it the most are the ones who are least excited to register children. You'd have heard the Honorable Prime Minister speak about violence and the importance of parents in reducing that. But it's not just the violence. It goes wider into the expectations of parents for their children and the drive for parents to encourage children to take up opportunity when it is offered. Because the critical nature of what is happening in our country right now in the education sector has implications for our country in terms of work, in terms of national security, social development. If we have underprepared persons at this level, these are the persons that are going to be in the system requiring our taxpayers' dollars to be able to support them. And it's important that we do that, because as a society, we must move forward together. And therefore, when we speak to the fact that we already have a social development bill in terms of grants of over $5 billion, then we understand that's an annual bill. Then we understand that the more persons that are underprepared, even as we spend the money in education to prepare them, it means that they are going to be now dependent more and more on our government for their support. So the implications of what is happening at the SCA level, at the CXC level, that has implications for all of us, for our country. And therefore, even as we have introduced the Vacation Division program to deal with that, to start to deal with that, there is more to be done in terms of how we manage these students throughout their secondary career. Because what we want from them would be the productive, disciplined, and tolerant citizen to be able to carry out and to join that world of work in the future. So the collaboration of the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Youth Development and National Service, Ministry of National Security, Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, that is what the Cabinet is considering even now. Having conversations with the principals where we are going to have the largest catchment of these students, and they are in the majority in terms of the cohort for this year, and that might be a pattern we will see for the next few years as the learning loss from COVID plays itself out. And therefore, over the next 5 years, the program of work in the education sector to give them the skills that they need, to have them perform in the way that they must so that they can join the world of work in the future. That's where we are now, focusing on math and literacy as fundamental for them to be able to join the world of work. Focusing on partnerships with corporate sector and real-life internships. Because one of the things when students underperform and they feel as though they have no hope and no future, one of the things that keeps them grounded would be a tying in of the education that they are receiving with actual real-life opportunity that allows them to see how it can be applied to their life and how it is important. Because one thing that will cause attrition, and this is what we speak to our principals about, one thing that causes attrition is when our students don't relate what is happening in the classroom to their real life. And so those partnerships are important. Of course, the emphasis on digital transformation, because these are the digital natives, and we have to teach in that way. And therefore, right now, the Ministry of Education is involved with the Ministry of Digital Transformation in procuring the e-books and working on the e-classroom that we intend to roll out within this academic year, phase by phase, so that our students will now have a link digitally, a formal link to that e-classroom, allowing them to have self-directed learning, because we want them to be self-directed to be able to work from home. That's the future of work that we are speaking about. So we have now to adapt the way we interact with them. More focus on digital, more focus on being self-directed. The emphasis on digital data collection in the ministry itself, so the systems of the ministry must also transform. Consider that the attendance register is still taken in general as a physical thing. And therefore, when we were faced with COVID and students not being in school, that fundamental role of just knowing who was present in the classroom could no longer be physical. And so even the systems of the Ministry of Education, the fundamental systems, have had to adapt to be able to interact with their students in a way that prepares them for the future and the world of work as we would expect it to be. Changing exam structures, formats, the emphasis of exams. And as I speak to the emphasis of exams, and we speak to the e-testing that we must also move to as our students get prepared in that way, the emphasis on the values, attitudes, and behaviors. It's important to look at the curriculum and how we deliver the curriculum and how our students are encouraged to be able to absorb the curriculum we are offering, but their values, attitudes, behaviors. Another important critical element, and I'm sure that is something that HR professionals could attest to. It's not simply their qualifications, it is the way they behave, what they hold as important, their ethics, their morality. These are also things mentioned in Vision 2030, pulled out and identified as being overall negative in Trinidad and Tobago with respect to education, our focus on education, and the way our students adapt and present themselves. And I go back to the Honorable Prime Minister and his focus on parents and what parents need to inculcate in our young generation. And it speaks directly as well to those things, the softer skills, the person they are becoming. That is also critical. And if we want to change that in our education sector, we are going to have to find ways, and we are discussing them now, we are going to have to find ways to ensure that these things and the opportunity to develop the positive values, attitudes, and behaviors that is incorporated into the way we transition our students. It's emphasized at the primary school level, and we must, what we examine, Trinidad and Tobago as a culture, what we examine or make mandatory, then people pay attention to that. And we must facilitate the development of these in our schools with a focus on equity. So it must not only be the students that can afford who are given the opportunity to develop these things, these skills. And we know what develops them. Involvement in visual and performing arts, involvement in team sports. These are things that encourage the values, attitudes, and behaviors that we want. And therefore, in the education sector, in the very near future, ways to incorporate that into our education sector, especially at the primary school level, these are things that we are focusing on. So as we look from our early childhood centers to the tertiary, we are honing in on the skills that are required for our students to be able to live in this world, to take Trinidad and Tobago along that trajectory that is required for the achievement of Vision 2030. And in all of this, we fully understand our role in the future of work and what we have to do. And the thing being not just education's business, but we speak in education about needing a village. It takes all of us, all sectors, to speak with the same voice, to say to our students that we expect the best from you, that Trinidad and Tobago expects the best from you, to say to our students and to encourage in any way possible the progress of our students. When we made the call in September 2020 for Adopt a School, and we asked the corporate sector to pour into the lives of our students, the response was overwhelming. And we have continued that conversation because it is something that always happened in some cases, and we got many new companies coming into the initiative, and we will continue to make the call from the Ministry of Education, calling on our village at this critical time in Trinidad and Tobago's history to be able to pour into the lives and invest in our students, because we need the support of all of us, and all of us need to understand that education is everyone's business. So the Ministry of Education understands the link between the future of work and the future of education. And we also understand the importance of all of us being on the same page. We know what we have to do, and it will not be immediate, but we are immediately taking the steps required at this time to progress us in that direction. This is a change management issue. Change in psyche, change in practices, change in processes, change in systems, and it will simply not be immediate, but it will be to the benefit of Trinidad and Tobago to carry everyone along in this change. So even as we make our changes within the ministry, in our system, we will be looking to corporate Trinidad and Tobago, we will be looking to our parents, we will be looking to the church to be able to assist our country in this critical time. And I know that we can depend on all institutions to assist us as we move forward. Thank you for the opportunity, and we look forward to your input as we do our best from education to change our Trinidad and Tobago that we love.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Honorable Stephen McClushy, MP, Minister of Labour.
We sometimes think about the world of work and we simplify the idea that somehow the world of work will emerge and in the future we will begin working in ways that we have not, without rationalizing the problems that we are likely to meet and encounter along the way. An event such as this demonstrates that although we may have varying perspectives which may stem from our occupational fields, constructive and meaningful dialogue is possible. I commend the Human Resource Management Association of Trinidad and Tobago for organizing such an event to create synergies from our dialogue and deliberations as you seek to formulate and implement a working roadmap for the future of work. As Minister of Labour, I am happy to share some of my perspectives on the future of work, as well as to learn from you, the HR experts, on how we can together create a future that is productive, empowering, innovative, and rewarding for our employees and employers. The term future of work is conceptualized in various ways. Quite commonly, it is defined as the projection of how work, workers, workplace, and work relations will evolve in the years ahead. In fact, we are currently living the future of work, in case you didn't know. That was being spoken of since 2010, when the ILO opened dialogue on this subject. The future of work is indeed an evolving concept that will engage our minds perpetually. As we conceptualize the future of work, we must address 5 fundamental questions. What the work is, or will it be in the future? How the work is done? Who does the work? Where is the work done? And when is the work done? In 2022, we are witnessing the combined effect of the 4th Industrial Revolution, characterized by rapid technology change and the effects of COVID-19 pandemic, which catapulted the world into the future of work, perhaps faster than we would have expected. It is therefore safe to say that the future of work, of which we have been speaking since 2010, and even before that, is upon us now. We are living the future of work. The World Economic Forum estimates that the 4th Industrial Revolution is expected to transform more than 1 billion jobs in the next decade, which is almost 1/3 of jobs globally. It is also expected that technological transformation is estimated to create 133 million new jobs, jobs we have not yet heard of. Added to this, in the current transition towards the green economy, which experts suggest will see some traditional jobs being phased out and new ones being created. In light of all this, the first consideration I wish to share is that the future of work centers around people. Not machines, not digitization, not megastructures, but people. While we appreciate that rapid advances in technology, characteristic of the 4th Industrial Revolution, had led us to speak about automation, artificial intelligence, telework, and the like, the critical element in the workforce will continue to be people. It is for this reason that our roadmap for Trinidad and Tobago post-COVID-19 has a specific objective of leaving no one behind. The roadmap also emphasizes human capital development, where the workforce is provided with the knowledge and skills required to drive sustainable growth, competitiveness, and innovation across such as ICT, energy, construction, manufacturing, and education. The roadmap calls for urgent action to nurture a future-ready workforce that can dynamically adopt and utilize existing and new technologies and digital solutions with ease. On this note, I am elated to see on the agenda for this session that there is a launch of a human capital investment fund. Additionally, the World Economic Forum calls for a reskilling revolution. It is said that we need to prioritize reskilling and retooling where people have the education, training, and skills to meet the demands of their changing jobs today and prepare for jobs tomorrow. And we heard how we may make this possible from our last speaker with regards to our educational trust and what is needed. We need to prioritize the mental health and well-being of our employees. Improved physical, mental, and emotional health of families, workers, and the community at large continue to be a priority of this government. While the government seeks to pursue initiatives aimed at fostering healthy lifestyles and improving access to and delivery of public health, as HR professionals, you have a great responsibility within your organization to be the custodian of the health and well-being of your employees. Note also that this is further emphasized in light of the adoption at the 110th session of the International Labour Organization Conference of the International Labour Organization held in June 2022 of a safe and healthy working environment as an addition to the fundamental principles and rights at work. The second point that I wish to make is that the future of work requires us to focus on the institutions of work and how they function. Organizations are not just about systems, policies, procedures, and control, but rather about harnessing the creative and innovative energies of the workers in the changing environment to provide cutting-edge goods and services. It is time for us to do some introspection on how our institutions operate, how work processes are organized, and how decisions are made. It is time for us to realize that the top-down approach, the ivory tower syndrome, cannot work in these dynamic times, and we need to deliberately invest in modes of communication that would facilitate the involvement of our workers in the important decisions that we are called upon to make. Mechanisms that promote tripartite dialogue between employers, employees, and employees' representatives and government should not only be encouraged, but should form an integral part in determining policy, legislation, organizational systems, and work processes. Thirdly, the future of work calls for a focus on decent work. Despite all the changes that are taking place in the world of work, where the only constant is change, one thing that must never change is the priority and respect that we accord to fundamental principles and rights of work. I know that you are all too familiar with these rights, inclusive of the right to a safe and healthy work environment, the right to freedom of association and collective bargaining, and the right to an environment free from discrimination, violence, harassment, to name a few. As Minister of Labor, I am deeply concerned about the many reports that are made to the Ministry of Labor, particularly over the past 2 years, where these rights have been flouted, where the COVID-19 pandemic was used as an excuse to circumvent national laws aimed at protecting the right at work. These include workers' pay being cut without consultation with them or their representative organizations, failure by employers to make NIS payments, breaches of the Minimum Wage Act and sectorial orders, as well as the Maternity Protection Act. We must work together to ensure that work is productive, rights are protected, and it adds dignity to people's lives. I am also fully aware that workers have important obligations and responsibilities to the organization they serve. And as such, at the Ministry of Labor, we are not only interested in protecting the rights of workers, but in also ensuring that both employers and employees uphold their responsibilities in the workplace. Conversations such as this help in defining policy objectives and eventually legislation. In this regard, the government is actively framing the current pieces of legislation, including, but not limited to, the Industrial Relations Act, the Trade Union Act, Workers' Compensation, Employment Standards, Maternity Protection, OSH amendments, and the migration policy. Creating these laws and amendments and finding consensus among parties with various agendas is no easy walk in the park. Employers, employees, trade unions, and government will have to find common ground, change perspectives, and adapt in ways that we have not seen before. Businesses without walls, jobs without set working hours, and employee appraisals in virtual environments are but a few things that will require changes in strategy. This is also true for the approach to the employer-trade union negotiation. We will all have to have difficult conversations in the coming years to manage our way through the emerging maze that threatens to be confrontational and maybe even nasty at times. But the dialogue must be had. I do see the possibility of working together to overcome our differences and to look forward to being part of the solution rather than being part of the problem. Additionally, may I add that at the global level, discussions on the future of work have been featuring prominently, including at the level of the International Labour Organization. In joining with the ILO in celebrating its centenary anniversary in 2019, the Ministry of Labour organized a series of centenary activities around the theme of the future of work. Some of you may have been part of these discussions. Following this, it was determined that a number of follow-up activities would be pursued, recognizing the need to continue engaging stakeholders in this important issue. One of the things that I note is that we say that change is constant, and we embrace change. But when the idea of change walks through the door, we all seem to pull swords and hold on to old ideals and old ideas and old ways of doing things. We're gathered here today to talk about the future of work. In many aspects, the future of work, or changes in the future of work, has begun to take place. And if we do not let go of our predetermined ideas on what is good, what is bad, and what should be, then we're in for a rough ride. We're in for a ride that would see us not accomplish our 2030 goals and to move Trinidad and Tobago further along the pendulum. One of the issues that, as I heard my colleagues speak about education, and one that should really address our minds, is the issue of migration and the migration policy, which speaks to whether we have enough people to do the work that is required at the appropriate level with the appropriate skill sets and the appropriate education. So whether it's through CSME or through Venezuela or Colombia or wherever, we cannot hide or shirk from the discussion. But when we start identifying, as many economists have, that we need to have a proper migration policy that brings like Canada does, brings the necessary skills, we again draw swords and talk about people coming to take work and starting to denigrate them and all the like. We cannot, and we do not have probably all the skill sets that we will need in the future. Therefore, we have to import some. But we have to do so in a controlled way that brings benefit to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Very often, a number of companies started doing well during the pandemic with regards to work at home and so on. And from the time the pandemic was lifted, we all went back to, most people went back to traditional thinking that you have to be in the office and I need you to be here. No matter as businesses, you lose millions of dollars of non-productive time wasted in traffic jams, and by the time the employee reaches to work, they're no good for themselves. They have to take 2 hours to catch themselves. But we hold on to the old ideals that you must be in the office. And not everybody needs to be in the office. And we need to be brave and we need to be different. We need to do things and create environments that are really enabling and cutting edge. I read somewhere recently, one of the European countries, I believe is Holland, am I right? That spoke towards making work from home part of their law, part of their labor laws. I know we will speak it, but in Trinidad, we'll probably not go there for a while. I look forward to hearing from the very esteemed panel and learning from your experiences and realities as we continue to work together in creating a future of work that generations to come can enjoy. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, could you put your hands together for our moderator, Hema Ramkisoon. We're going to get things started, and at this juncture, Hema, I'm going to turn things over to you.
So we're talking about the future of work, and this is a C-suite conversation. In 2020, before the onset of COVID-19, before the lockdowns and the restrictions, the world of work was already changing. Transformation was taking place. We were in the middle of digitization. We were understanding what the 21st century work meant. Then COVID happened. Many companies were forced to adapt. Some survived, others didn't. You are all sitting here because you represent the companies that continue to strive and continue to succeed. What exactly changed? What changed and will remain changed forever? Sam, because you're sitting next to me, we can start.
No, I totally agree with that statement. The changes in work started before the pandemic. And if I reflect on the energy sector, that transition certainly found itself in the front line of the energy sectors, specifically in an environment where there are always challenges with respect to health and safety. That transition saw a move towards greater use of automated equipment. For example, in the space of inspections, critical vessels where you have your processes, all present dangerous environments. And so pre-pandemic, we have significantly moved towards the use of automated equipment, vessels, which would allow employees to remain outside of that front line. And so that obviously speaks to one aspect of changes that took place prior to the pandemic. And on the people side, the support staff for those who provide critical support to the frontline staff. Those areas also experienced changes pre-pandemic. We were already in the throes of digitalization, as we've mentioned, and so the transition of skill sets really began pre-pandemic.
Did the pandemic accelerate it?
Oh, it certainly did. If I look at the energy sector again, we were faced with an environment where lots of activities were taking place in Trinidad, for example. Critical projects all geared towards increasing our hydrocarbon production. And as you know, it's a very capital-intensive area of business. So with the oncoming of the pandemic, we were actually in the throes of critical exploration activities, drilling activities are very expensive, of the order of hundreds of millions of US dollars per day. And so it was really necessary for the authorities to deem that sector as a critical sector. And so we had to work around the lockdown. That led to the support staff especially having to continue to deliver, not in the physical workspace, but from home. And I would dare say that no one felt that that was achievable. I can speak to and enumerate significant projects that we were able to continue and to bring first gas to production, many critical projects, all during the pandemic, all whilst we were learning to adjust to that new reality. So it has accelerated the change, and I would say for the good.
Well, let's see if that is the norm. Dr. Haberman, you took on a position in the middle of the pandemic.
Yes.
So that's an interesting transition in itself. Tell me a little bit about the changes that occurred during your transition and what is going to stay.
The institution I work for, as well as the media industry, they were considered essential or essential service. So you had a lot of the staff still required to turn up physically. While there were arrangements made for work from home, more to control the number of people in the physical space, as I said, a lot of people ended up having to, come out to work. So as you know, media, the fourth estate, there is the need to deliver information to deliver accurate information in a very dynamic, changing environment where regulations were changing, laws were changing, the social environment was changing. In terms of the business, so there are several platforms on the media. So print, during the heights of the pandemic, there was a decrease in circulation because people were locked up in their homes. So they were depending on news mainly through television and social media. So there was a bump in viewership for television. For billboards, reduced business again because less traffic on the road, less eyeballs, for billboards. In terms of the team, we ended up having to come to an agreement with the union around, how do we treat with the declining revenues while trying to ensure that we kept all the staff, employed. And so during that time, the union was extremely flexible, extremely understanding, and they helped us work out a number of measures to, contain costs and ensure that we could retain each and every staff pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and of course now as we, ease out of the pandemic. Last but not least, one of the major impact on our business was the fact that radio, TV, and a number of our brands rely on live events, in-person events, so concerts and conferences and so on. And we didn't have those businesses to promote or to partner with, so that revenue stream would have also been impacted. However, one business that really flourished for us was, an unexpected increase in our technology business. So we found more companies asking, for us to help build websites. We facilitated virtual AGMs. I believe we were one of the first. And we facilitated a lot of virtual events for that matter. So everything, either came in studio or was facilitated via the internet. So those are the major highlights in terms of the changes that I witnessed in the media industry. And in terms of financial services, as I mentioned, certainly the frontline staff would have had to turn up to serve customers. So lots of parallels, even though it was a switching industry midstream the pandemic.
Well, you discovered innovation, I guess, and you also discovered a new stream of income. Now, Ms. Tejal, you're representing the services industry on this panel. The services industry, some flourished, others did not survive. What are some of the key learnings that you can kind of take away to say, this is why this business survived?
Thanks, Emma. First and foremost, I think given the changes in the digital space now and since COVID, we had a lot of resistance of particularly smaller businesses in transitioning, where the pandemic actually did, as you said earlier, accelerate that transition and force everyone to become more familiar with the digital space and digital transitions. Yes, there were businesses that did thrive. Accounting, the businesses that were able to transition or expand their services online were obviously the ones that were more resilient and took advantage of those opportunities. Businesses that were, for example, like high touch, the hospitality industry, the tour operators, anything relative to tourism and so on, all of those that did not have the opportunity or ability to go online because they are hands-on, those took the hardest hits and were a lot more dependent on government subsistence or government grants to try and recover from that. So we are seeing definitely the transition being accelerated in businesses like the banking, as I said, the accounting and those types of those services. Obviously, the working from home aspect of things has put a spin on what kind of policies need to be put in place, not only on a government level, but also with respect to human resources and their policies. How do you manage people that are working from home?
Right.
We have, I believe it's 69% over the next 2 years. We're going to see a 69% decrease in space requirements for larger businesses globally, right? Where I believe it was also the World Economic Forum that said we will see an expansion of like 97 million new jobs by 2025. So managing people online is a big issue.
Right.
How do you protect your business in terms of ensuring the production? How does the employee or the contract worker be protected from the business? And what rights do they have in terms of working online, not in an office? The monitoring policies. I think there are platforms that actually monitor people working from home to make sure they are actually doing work.
Ms. Lewis, let me ask you about the permanent changes. You know, Mr. Adams spoke about the fact that they are not going to return to 5 days a week in the office, that they are embracing this hybrid system. What are some of the changes that your organization has made that will stay with you?
With COVID-19, our market went home.
Yeah.
So the schools were closed and one couldn't reach the market. NEHUS, however, was prepared in terms of the development of technology as far as implementation of O365, SharePoint, and that allowed us to communicate with the employees to be able to deliver on our mandate. What we saw in March 2022, in fact, is the permanent change towards virtual delivery. So our normal flagship project, which is called SciTechnoFest, we held it in March 2020, which is normally held face-to-face. 90% of the delivery was via the virtual platform. So we see a virtual delivery of our CAMs and other programs and projects will be held via that medium. While we do have face-to-face interactions through our collaborations with other institutions such as NALIS, we do believe that using the virtual platform allows us to have a wider reach to our student population, to our communities, as well as to the public.
For those who are still skeptical, is the quality the same? Have they embraced the virtual model of learning?
We have had a good reception from our student population and those, especially in particular parents, who support the students in coming onto the platform. And employee resilience. The employees at NEHUS are part of the success story for being able to navigate COVID.
Right.
There is an excitement among the employees about the products that they deliver. There's a loyalty to the brand of NEHUS, and together with the engagement of students, NEHUS is set to deliver on its mandate in terms of STEM education, in terms of educator training, and the use of the virtual platform has been successful. I'm not saying that there haven't been challenges. While we do in person and in terms of materials that we have to use for the students, it's more available. There are some challenges in terms of what are the materials, are the students getting the right material?
Right.
But as far as the success of the use of the virtual platform, SciTechnoFest is a testimony to that success.
The banking sector had to make serious changes very quickly, not only for safety of their employees, but also the safety to the public as well. What is going to permanently stay with Republic Bank?
From a Republic Group perspective, what the pandemic actually did was accelerate the obsolescence of the words permanent and fixed. So there's nothing that I would say has been permanently changed. I think the uncertainty as a consequence of the pandemic caused us to have to place a greater focus on 3 areas from an HR perspective. One is flexibility, the other being change management, and the third area that we had to place additional emphasis on when it came to human resources is humanity. Because as we go forward into this future global world of work, we think those are going to be the 3 areas that will make the difference between future winners and future also-beans. So from our group's perspective, when I talked about humanity, it really wasn't talking about a balanced work-life arrangement. I really was referring to the fact that I know it may be controversial in a room full of human resource professionals, but that, I felt that in our organization, and certainly from what I'd experienced, the human resource professionals were placing more emphasis on the professional part and less on the human part. And from our organization's perspective, the idea was to kind of bring up the human part a little bit, and a number of initiatives were involved in doing so. Okay, from just looking after the employee, looking after the employee's family, right? Each individual, and this is why I say balance is a bit of an abused word and what have you. Each individual, their fulcrum point is different. So what is balance for you in terms of work life, it might be different for me. And so, I try to get away from that and really let's see how we treat with each person as an individual, and look after them and their families. Okay. And that's what we try to focus on.
Mr. Mahabir Singh, if I have to ask you about the construction sector, how have things changed in the last 2 years, and how will it continue to change in the future?
Okay, good morning, Hema. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank you for inviting the Contractors Association to be part of this discussion. The construction sector is what you call a bricks and mortar industry. You need to be present to build. However, there are some radical changes that did occur in the industry. One example is tendering. Contractors earn work via bidding, and we had seen some radical changes with the COVID-19 in terms of state enterprise inviting bids electronically. So normally you would have a pretender meeting where you have a room of 30, 40 persons attending. We saw that those meetings going virtual. Releasing a bid documents, tender documents, drawings, specification have been issued via electronic means, and also submissions. So the whole bidding process, where it used to be a manual process in terms of photocopying, packaging, delivering, has gone totally electronic, and the industry has adopted, and not only large contractors, medium-sized and small contractors. So I would say the COVID-19 pandemic, fast forward, the whole electronic technology effort in terms of bidding and tendering for work. Other changes that occur in the industry is technology. The use of technology in terms of heavy equipment, design, engineering services, those areas has accelerated. And what the industry sees now is that there's a greater need for training. Example, repairing an excavator or heavy equipment is a lot more computer-based, electronic-based, as opposed to 10, 15 years ago, it would have been hydraulics and engine-driven. So there's a demand for technology in terms of retooling personnel, training personnel, in terms of using technology. In terms of design, there's something called building information modeling, which is catching up in Europe and has started to filter to Trinidad, and that would be implemented, rolling out, and there would be a demand. So again, there's a new profession called what you call the BIM engineer, right. And there's a lot in Europe. In fact, on construction projects in Europe, there's a requirement to have a BIM engineer on your team.
Now, Richard, I want to ask you, you are sitting in a very unique position today because the hospitality industry is one not many people survive. The big players had to find innovative ways. You were really shut out from the rest of the world just because of no travel. The leisure and hospitality industry took a huge hit. That impact, what did you learn about your ability to be resilient, and what did you have to do to be resilient?
For me, it was, I remember the week when the Honourable Prime Minister announced that we're going to close the border. And I was thinking to myself, right, now what? And I was in the lobby, and I remember looking at people, and I don't think I've ever seen people leave the Hyatt so quickly. So, I mean, we didn't have a plan. No one had a plan. Everybody thinks, we're looking at this, we're looking at that. We had no idea. We obviously had a lot of global support, which was fabulous. We had properties in China that had a bit of a head start on us, and then obviously as it crossed the world, we learned from other countries. So we knew certain things were going to happen, but I think that there was always an element of, we'll be okay, which, that's, I think, the last obstacle that people adopt. No, it's not. We need to think a little bit more drastically. So I think our major concern was, again, obviously looking after our people. Because when you have a hotel and you have no business, there is that inevitability that things are not going to go the way you planned according to your business plan. So what are we going to do? How are we going to survive? How are we going to get hard-earned cash in just to survive? And we weren't even thinking. It was very evident from a very early stage. Budget, forget it. Now it's survival mode. What do we do?
What did you do?
Honestly, we had a lot of brainstorming. Luckily, we are quite digitalized, so we have a lot of data that we can pull out at any given moment. So we know exactly, ratios of employees, et cetera, that we do for figures. So we have a sound knowledge of financially where we need to be at every level of occupancy. So we know what needs to be done. So inevitably, in the experience that we'd learned from other countries as well, there would come a time that we may have to retrench people. I mean, it was a sad inevitability. In this business, there was no way out. So we just put everything on the table and said, okay, how long can we go with what we've got in the bank to avoid that decision? We did some presentations and said, look, okay, to our owning company, we can survive at this rate until such and such a time, based on projections of what could happen. And then we said, basically, after that, we're going to have to make a decision about, if it's still in full swing pandemic mode, we're going to have to make a decision. So we knew when it was coming, we knew what we would have to do, and then we were just basically focusing on what we could do to stop that happening. Now, as successful as we were in 2019, closing the year at 80%, let's be honest, when the borders closed, 80% of our incoming is from either the US or South America or Europe. So local demographic as well, out of 1.4 million, I think we're painfully aware that not everyone had the opportunity to come and stay at the hotel and keep us afloat. And then obviously with curfews and we weren't allowed to operate the restaurants, et cetera, we kind of panicked. All right, I mean, to be honest with you, we didn't know what to do. But then I started to talk to people from the energy sector and realized that they are going to need a certain different way of operating. So thankfully, through connections with certain companies, we managed to sort of work out a system whereby it wasn't a quarantine or an isolation situation. It was basically it was a buffer zone, for want of a better word. So they would bring in their crews. We would have them tested, and if they were negative, they were allowed to stay. If they were positive, we'd escort them very friendly to a car that would take them to another facility. Our goal for the last literally year and a half to 2 years was to break even.
How has customer service changed after the pandemic?
That's a good question. Customer service is a big issue that plagues us in Trinidad in terms of the various types of services that are offered, particularly in the tourism sector, and our service providers understanding, or at least the employees understanding the importance of the foreign dollar in our tourism sector and hospitality industry.
That is the area that has accelerated maybe the fastest, if you're looking at one specific area. And it is probably going to continue to accelerate. You still have certain types of clients who have not 100% embraced the technology, and there will always be those clients. But again, this is why I said, flexibility is what is going to be required.
When you look at the digitization, you look at automation, how has customer service changed in the media industry because of COVID?
Because a big part of our business is sales, selling all the brands. We ended up having to meet requirements to do virtual meetings. As a person with a sales background, it's honestly not the same. Nothing beats a face-to-face meeting, but our sales team had to adapt to the client's needs and to the health and safety requirements and adapt to a virtual environment. The other thing that has changed from a customer service perspective is that the customers are demanding that more things be done digitally.
Richard, has customer service changed drastically?
If you take a hotel and the way that we were operating, it sounds hilarious now we talk about it, but it wasn't at the time. It was literally avoid people at all costs, which isn't really what we teach people at hospitality school or when we onboard people. So, you know, so stay away from people. It kind of contradicts what we do.
Right.
So for a good period of time, we were literally taking food in plastic boxes up to the floors where we had the crews that weren't allowed out of their rooms, and the modus operandi was knock on the door, put the tray, run.
That must have been interesting.
Yeah, so if you think that people have been doing that for 6 months to a year, when people started to come back, it was like, blimey, what do we do now? You know, so people that talk and want smiles and customer service, etc., and also I think masks, thank goodness we're going to get rid of them, but that added to that struggle. But we're on track, and I think that we have a reasonable reputation, I believe, of giving solid, regular standard of service and exceeding expectations. So we are gladly onboarding more people, and I think that, you know, our training is exemplary, so we're on target.
Sure. I want to ask, you know, we talk about the changing environment. Ron, you said that you lead and you show. You do not go to the office 5 days a week. How then do you measure productivity? In the post-COVID era, and the Minister of Education said, some people can manage their times. I know it was very difficult for me to learn to manage my time at home. So how do you manage productivity? How do you ensure that your employee is delivering?
Quite frankly, we should have always been driven by performance management, pandemic or not. And as I said earlier, clearly it's based on delivery. And we all have performance objectives, clearly set out starting from the strategy of the organization through your mission critical tactics down to your goals and objectives by departments. But again, the big thing is that the pandemic has taught us that the dynamic and the thought process that we all have to be physically in the office 5 days a week to be able to achieve those very goals and objectives have now been blown out of the water. And so the deliverables are the same. In fact, they are increasing demands as a result of things such as the energy transition, the requirement for us to produce cleaner energy and more energy. That has brought new requirements and new demands. And it really requires heart, and again, I make the point, leadership. It's very easy with those changes, the demands of the energy transition, the economic environment, and all of the tough things coming at you. The easiest thing to do is to revert to those previous practices. Right. And so, again, I reiterate the point that it starts from the top. If I can demonstrate that I can achieve and I can do what I need to do for the shareholders of Atlantic, for my internal stakeholders, if I can deliver on that from my position, then surely my executive team can, the team leads, and everyone else can. So,
Mark, I want to ask you that question for your sector. In terms of the transition and measuring productivity, has it increased, has it decreased? Are your members saying there's a difficulty in making their KPIs in this post-pandemic world with this new reality?
But we have seen a lot of cross-training. Again, because we're still in a pandemic, so you may have a site with 10, 15 persons and 3 show up or report with the virus, and you need to have some backup or contingency plans. So you have a lot of cross-training to ensure that you could deliver and still have the project moving forward.
Mrs. Lewis, let me ask you, you listen to Ron Adams, is he being idealistic, or is he being, are we being realistic that we can really do this hybrid system 3 days a week, 2 days a week, and still make the KPIs, still make the shareholders happy, still make the profit margins?
I agree with that concept. In fact, During the pandemic, we saw employees working longer hours and different hours. So where there was an 8 to 4 or flexi time, you found that employees were working in the middle of the evening, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and you got reports from them. The idea is that you can deliver, once you're committed, you can deliver on your KPIs or on your reports, because it's not open-ended. We have targets that are set by our strategic plan, as well as we have targets that are set by our board and board meetings. The employees have been able to deliver their reports because they have access to the information virtually, and they do not need, you have to be careful, they need to come into the office less to be able to manage the delivery.
One of the other major changes during the pandemic would be the actual physical workspace. We had to protect the employees coming to work, but also now we see the infrastructure changing. Dr. Malcolm, how has that impacted media in particular?
So lots of changes, Hema. So for example, on set, we could no longer have live guests. We could no longer have guests on set, for Morning Brew, or, guests in studio for the radio. So that really changed, how we delivered our service. And again, because, media is a people, high interaction kind of business, we had to take everything virtual, given how sometimes the close proximity, people sit, in studio. We only maybe just last week or maybe 2 weeks ago reintroduced people being able to come on set. The other thing is quite a few of our floors, it's an open layout, an open structure where there are cubicles side by side. So again, we had to rotate staff because we couldn't have people sitting directly across from each other or in such close proximity. So some of the other things, of course, the reporters having to adjust to wearing masks while reporting, and some of them complain that, we sound so muffled, it's so hard, like we have to enunciate more now to ensure that the viewers can hear what we're saying. So quite, a lot of adjustment in ensuring that we adhere to, the health and safety restrictions, but also protected the employees and our guests and our customers.
Mark, in terms of your membership, that physical workspace, has it permanently changed?
What we've seen, even in the real estate side of things and with construction in mind as well, a lot of people, while they were locked down, had to find and repurpose spaces in their properties that they can actually work from. And businesses that, as was mentioned, keeping your employees safe, you have, whether the small businesses, for example, have sufficient space to have all of their employees in one location. So they had to do the hybrid arrangement and have people work from home, or have people do shifts where some people will work 1 week and other people work the other week. And when they're not in the office, they're doing the online type work. So we have seen, a lot of transitioning. A lot of people like to use the term pivot, right? We've seen a lot of innovative approaches to how people are actually, operating their businesses and reaching their customers and their clients. It's definitely not business as usual. People are being forced to look at the intelligence, the artificial intelligence approaches, and the technology that's available to them to actually transition their business and keep it going forward, rather than having the circumstances that we're in with lockdowns and with, restricted movement and different things, jeopardize their businesses.
The HIMA president during her address spoke about the concept of the mass resignation. In the United States in particular, there was this huge wave of resignations. Maybe it was the mortality facing people, the big questions about what do I really do, what is meaning in life. How, first of all, did your organizations see any sort of movements at all? And the second part of the question, how then do you keep staff motivated at a time when you are inundated with headlines, with death tolls, and also finding meaning in this job? Stan, let me start with you.
That's an interesting one. I think definitely there has been a change in what I like to call the psychology of the worker, and the psychology of the kind of space that they would like to work in. And what I have seen is that the employee of the future wants not just to be delivering on the goals and objectives. The employee of the future wants to work for an entity that has a purpose. And each individual wants to feel really strongly about the purpose, the why they are there. They want to work for an entity that has the flavor of being a force for good. And so if you think about that, it means that to get employees to transition from that pandemic phase to want to continue to work for your organization, it means that your leaders have to understand this, your HR professionals, your VP of HR, the one who sits at the side of the CEO, has to understand that and has to be able to support the pivoting of that. So certainly there has been a shift, and it has broadened and deepened the requirement for that type of skill set, both from the C-suite, both from the CEO, but also with those who support the CEO and the leaders that interact and influence in a very direct way the employee body.
This question to you, Ms. Matisse, to get your thoughts on it and also your closing remarks about your advice to HR before we get into our feature speaker.
You know, we viewed it a little bit like clothes and life. You know, one size is not going to fit everyone, and the same size might not fit you all of the time. So there's a lot of flexibility that has to be built into it. So we approach it from that perspective. Again, as well, when it came to objectives, you know, the tangible objectives were pretty easy to measure. It was the intangible objectives that were more of a challenge. You know, particularly for the leaders in the organization who were responsible for developing the staff beneath them. And that kind of leads into the question, Hima, about resignations and how do we cater for the future. There was no upsurge in resignation. I think the experience in the Caribbean was a little bit different.
Yes.
To outside of the Caribbean. But what we are seeing, and if you talk about what the VP for HR, right, at the group level would need to be focusing on, you know, the employees of the future, as Ronald indicated, you know, they want a little bit more than just a job. What we have seen is, in addition to technology and the change management around technology and ensuring that people are equipped from that perspective, you know, the entire debate around diversity and equity and inclusion is going to be very, very important for HR leaders as we move forward. And inclusion is not what you do. Inclusion is what people feel. And therein is going to be an additional challenge for the leaders of the future, the CEOs and the VPs and HR, etc. In terms of closing remarks, what I can say is that I don't envy HR professionals as we move forward. In fact, I don't envy those who have to lead any type of organization in the years to come. Right? Given the fact that the pace of uncertainty is going to accelerate, and even if it doesn't, because it could, the demands on every individual responsible for some other individual is going to be greater. Okay, and I'll finish where I started, which is where I think if as leaders, as HR professionals, we focus on the human side, then whatever the challenge, you know, all of the organizations will overcome them.
So I know we're coming to the end of our discussion, and before we invite our representative from the Society of Human Resources, and I know that's Johnny Taylor, so I know a lot of you are waiting to hear his greetings. Everyone will have a minute for their closing comments. And Richard, maybe we can start with you. What advice would you give to HR? I know we are all sitting here, you are all members of the C-suite conversation. What advice would you have for HR?
I think in my experiences over the last 2 years, I think what I've missed more than anything is a more open-minded approach to giving feedback. I think that what I've learned in Trinidad over the last 2 years is that we are very reluctant to have harder conversations with people, right? And by that I mean not rude, I mean just saying the truth. If you're going to do an evaluation with someone, it can't be like a copy of your child's Enid Blyton book, right? Because you're not going to learn anything from that. And my biggest challenge is when we had to decide who could take on a new role or be fused with the position that we decided to join entities. We didn't have as much knowledge as we needed to make that decision, but also the person involved. Honestly, reading their evaluations at times, it was like, really nice bloke, lovely to work with, great. But that's not going to help them grow. So I think we need to be able to have those conversations. We need to do proper evaluations. We need to have clearer targets.
Yeah.
And I think we have to focus much more on training based on those metrics.
Yeah.
And I think accountability, for me, is the #1 ingredient that we all have to be better at.
Sure. Mrs. Lewis, your closing comments. What advice do you have?
I want to quote the book of Revelation, where St. John the Apostle says to the churches, listen to what the spirits are saying to the churches. And in terms of HR and development as we go into the future of work, we cannot ignore what is happening in the global arena with regard to digitization, with regard to AI, with regard to automation. HR needs to look at the templates that they now use in order to assess, and I heard one of the participants with regard to performance management. Performance management, one may have to review how performance management is done.
Sure.
The employee of the future, if we look at some of our documentaries, all they need is a Wi-Fi signal. Some of the young workforce, they need a strong Wi-Fi signal, so they don't need brick and mortar. With all due respect, Glenn.
Ms. Lewis, thank you so much.
They don't need brick and mortar.
For that advice, and I know the HR professionals. I will give the other three panelists 30 seconds each, your closing comments.
Sure, thank you, Hima. One of the first things I would say is that HR, there's a lot of work out there for you all, in particular the fact that you all can be recognized in change management as well, and understanding what businesses need and what type of jobs those businesses require to be successful.
Okay, I think that this is a prime time for HR professionals to show up as a true strategic partner with the CEO and the other executives. I think that they will have a role in anticipating the changes that will happen in the business so that they can provide advice, counsel, guidance around, what moves the business needs to make, infrastructure, staffing, changing roles. So as I said, there are more than ever, I think, vested strategic partners. And so it means that they need to do research and ensure that they're coming to the table with ideas and insights and foresight and vision.
Ron, your final word.
Let me take my 30 seconds to recognize Atlantic's VP HR, Aline Hendrickson, and the Atlantic HR team, and my friends from NGC, Nicola and others. And no pressure. Everything that has been said, you are expected to do and support the CEO. You're expected to be strategic, tactical, technical, understand the business that we run and that we are accountable for. You're expected to be diverse. You're expected to be all of those things. No lack of work for you. It's not business as usual. The important thing is that we are here to support you so that you can support us.
Thank you very much. And a round of applause to the panel and all of the contributors. Thank you so much. So at this time, I think we are ready to connect with Johnny Taylor of the Society of Human Resources.
So, hey everyone, can you hear me? Give me a nod. Okay, I just want to thank you all so much. I wish I were there. In fact, this morning I was speaking with the chair of our board and I said, I'm going to talk to the folks in the Caribbean. She says, oh my gosh. I said, no, it's virtually. I surely wish I were there with you all. Thank you. I'm Johnny Taylor. I know my name. I'm the president and CEO of SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management. I want to start by offering a special thanks to Cavell Joseph and her team at the HR Management Association of Trinidad Trinidad and Tobago for this opportunity. For you, those of you who don't know, Cavell sort of found me in New Orleans and trapped me and said, I need you to become more engaged with the Caribbean. So Cavell, let me start with thank you for being so assertive. We won't call you aggressive, but so assertive in bringing SHRM to this part of the world, a place that I'm a Floridian. I'm born and raised in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I've been to Trinidad, I've been to Tobago, I've been to Bahamas, I've been to Jamaica, I've been to it all, but I've not come as the CEO of SHRM, and SHRM has not fully made its presence known in that part of the world. So thank you, Cavell, for keeping me honest on these things, and know that we're going to do a lot better than we've done in the past. So hello, Hermat. Hello, it's just an honor and a privilege to be here with you today. And again, you're going to see much more of us going forward. I was listening in as you discuss the future of work, which is what you all are convened to discuss today. And of course, I could go on and on about what I think are the challenges, the headwinds, as well as the tailwinds. There's some opportunities for us as we think about the future of work, what SHRM's role is, what HR professionals, what Hermat's role is, what all of our roles are going forward. But let me tell you, and I only have a few minutes, as we talk about the world of work, there are a couple of things that I hope. Yes, digitalization is there. Yes, diversity, equity, inclusion. Yes, upskilling and reskilling and all of that. All of those topics are actually spot on. But from the profession's standpoint, we as a group of professionals, as individual professionals and a group, we've got to ensure that the rest of the C-suite, I remember one of your colleagues, I didn't catch your name, but talking about the importance of us not only being concerned about what the employee of the future wants, but what the employer wants. We've got to get that balance right. I think as we've come out of this pandemic era, we were so focused on the well-being of our employees, their lives and their livelihoods, that perhaps we didn't do enough focus on what the business gets out of this. And at the end of the day, all of our businesses and our organizations are investing in people, and they expect a return on that investment. I was meeting with a group of CEOs just yesterday, and the discussion was all around, listen, we get it. We want employees to feel engaged at work. We want employees to feel valued. We want everything. We want the best for our employees. But HR, we want you to be asking the employees, what can they do for us in the process? And we may have gotten a little bit off kilter from the perspective of the other business leaders, your C-suite executives. And so I would encourage you, as you think about, the work that we're going to do in the future and the future of work more broadly, that we keep some balance here, that companies and employers need to get a return on their investment. The other area that is a really big issue for us is, and this is a global issue, is that of wage inflation. This is probably the biggest challenge that any of us are going to experience, even in those parts of the world where we've generally taken stuff and we've offshored it. Well, what you find is if you take it from this place to the other, to a new market, that market over time catches up. And all of those savings that you thought you'd realize went away because supply and demand drives a wage inflation. Globally, we are seeing prices, when it comes to people prices, wage inflation go through the roof. And it's actually not sustainable. We know this right here in the United States. It's great to say people are demanding 10, 15, 20% increases, but they have to be able to pass this cost on. And what we're learning is that the consumers are not willing to pay it. I know you all have a market that largely finds its success in tourism, for example. There is a point at which you pay people more, but the person who comes to your property is unwilling to absorb those costs. So we as business leaders who happen to be experts in human capital have to help our organizations figure out how to manage wage inflation. Again, every time I go from the United States government to governments in our states, we just left, where were we just the other day? We were for the World Federation of Personnel Management. It's the World Federation of People Management Organizations. We found ourselves in Amsterdam, and we were discussing this very issue across the globe of wage inflation and its ultimate impact on our economies and our employers. So think about that as you do the work of HR. The world of work is going to largely be influenced. In fact, much of what we're seeing when you see the discussions around AI, machine learning, one of the panelists today talked about where this is all all going, some of this is in response to wage inflation. I don't know if this is happening in the Caribbean, but I can tell you, you walk into a McDonald's here, there's one cashier and 10 machines now where you go place your order. It's totally in response to the need to control cost at the same time that we provide good service to our customers. So a lot's going on here, and when we think about the future of work, have to keep that in mind. SHRM takes great interest, and I want to be clear about this, in Trinidad and Tobago, and indeed the Caribbean as a whole. As I said at the outset, we haven't done that the best way. I joined as CEO in 2018. I believed that once I got my legs in 2020, I'd be really, really intentional about growing our presence in that part of the world. And then there's this little pesky thing called COVID that came around and prevented us from really driving our strategy to build really significant and meaningful relationships in the Caribbean. Well, we're going to do better. We know that we've had a decade-long partnership with HERMAT. In fact, 136 SHRM certified individuals were produced by HERMAT. So thank you. That is a significant number. You're talking about, delivering above your weight or punching above your weight. You've done it when you consider the size of your population of HR professionals. 159 active members that we have right there in Trinidad and Tobago. And the largest, in fact, one of the largest delegations that we get from HERMAT comes every year to our annual conference. And that's where I met Cavell. Listen, it is our honor and our privilege to continue expanding our partnership as we elevate the HR profession together. You can't just do it in the United States. You can't just do it in Europe. The entire globe, for us to be effective at elevating the HR profession, must work together. And that's why I'm committed to doing that. To this end, we're excited to announce that we are going to deepen our partnership with HERMAT in some pretty significant ways. Number one, we're going to launch together the SHRM People Manager Qualification. We call it a PMQ, not to be confused with the certification, which is your SHRM CP and SCP, but it's a PMQ really targeted at improving the quality of our people managers. Most of you know this deal, right? You come in, you come to work, you're planning to do really good strategic value-added HR work. And then an employee relations issue takes you out. So you spend most of your day or series of days responding to that. So we're not doing the really good, deep, high quality strategic HR work that we know we can deliver and that our business colleagues are expecting from us, our other business colleagues expect from us. Well, we decided that what we would do is come up with a people manager qualification, a really, really good new age. If you watched it, it's going to come out this summer, but it's really kind of cool. We set it up like TV shows, and they have episodes and they have characters, and it's intended not to teach HR people how to manage people, but your people managers how to be better people managers. We know that all of the data tells us that overwhelmingly people don't leave companies, they don't leave HR, they leave their people managers. And so this is intended to be HR's response to a business need, improving the quality of people managers, which should ultimately help us with retention. So we're going to launch it this summer in Trinidad and Tobago and around the Caribbean. And I would encourage you to take advantage of it. Some of the best companies in America have been using it over the last 2 years. We launched it just 2 years ago, and we're getting great results from a retention standpoint. That's what we're going to do, number one. Number two, and I'm especially and particularly excited to know that we're going to participate in the inaugural HERMAT HR Awards event this coming November. So again, Cavell had me locked in the office, and she's like, listen, you got to make this happen. And I said, when is it? So right after Thanksgiving here in the States, my colleague James Baker, my colleagues from our international group are going to come together, and we're going to celebrate that this inaugural event, HERMAT's first HR Awards ever, we're going to be there with you in a big way. I'm encouraging you all to come. We are actually working on right now bringing a pretty big name entertainer down there to give you a concert, and all of that funded by SHRM. I'm not going to ask you for any of it. I know you got to sign up to be there, but we're going to be the major sponsor to make sure that we launch the HERMAT HR Awards in a really big and significant way. I look forward, therefore, to meeting all of you in person. There's this thing they call FOMO, which is the fear of missing out. You're going to miss a really, really good time in November talking about a FOMO if you don't join join us for Hermat's HR Award. So that's what I wanted to leave you with. I know I don't have much time. I want to get you back on calendar and on your agenda for today. Let me end by just saying thank you. Thank you for the work that we're doing. We as HR professionals oftentimes are so busy pouring into other people that we don't take care of ourselves. So I'm going to ask you all to spend this summer going into the fall, making sure that while you're busy taking care of your employee population, that you take care of yourself. Mental health is a really, really, really big issue that we've signed up for to improve the overall mental health of our employees. But guess what? We've got to do it for HR professionals as well. You've been under intense amount of stress during the pandemic and this post-pandemic period. And I want to actually encourage each of you to make sure that you're taking care of your physical health as well as your mental and emotional health. God bless you all, and we'll see you in November.
I'm going to introduce our treasurer, the Board of Hermat, Miss Antonia Ferrier.
Desmond, I am ready to start. And in fact, that's how I'd like to start, by saying just start. Because that was the advice that was given to me by my very first manager that I worked with as a trainee, when he encountered me a few years later, still temping as a secretary, and he wanted to know why. And I explained that, my plan was to work and save up money so that I can go to university. And he said, you will find yourself doing just that, and then life will happen. You'll defer your plans, and then you will end up like one of our janitors who told me he was there to 60th year, retiring from work, wondering what happened to all his works and dreams. And he said to me, don't worry about where the money will come from. Just start. If you have a plan, just start. The money will come. And shortly after that, I saw that UE started offering the first year as a part-time, and still temping. I registered, not sure how I would pay for it. And my employers, impressed by my talents and abilities, extended me for 3 months. The money came. 2 years later, ready to start the second year of university, but now full-time. The money was not enough, but I registered anyway. And wouldn't you know, they put me on a project for 2 years that covered the cost, and the money came. Final year, CES ended, rates went up, and suddenly, again, I was out of funding, but I registered anyway. And wouldn't you know, I earned a bursary from NP for marketing that fully covered the cost of my final year. So once again, the money came. And so that philosophy of just starting, not to worry, the money will come, has fueled me and my ambitions over time and over the years. And I have applied it to many of our projects, including Hermat. So today I am here to start another venture on behalf of Hermat, and I am here to announce the start of our scholarship fund, which is to support the ambitions of persons like myself, 30 years ago, wanted to study but could not afford it. We want to support the ambitions of persons who would love the luxury of not having to work and to go to school at the same time by offering scholarships. We want to support the ambitions of young people leery about entering the world of work, not sure how to navigate it, by holding outreach programs to show them how to dress, how to interview, how to do their resume, how to prepare themselves so that they successfully enter the world of work. So we are starting a foundation, and we'd like to start it with your support. Now, we have started here with a very ambitious goal in post-pandemic economy of raising $1 million in 5 years. I know prior to the COVID and years going by, that would have been a drop in the bucket, but no more. So bold ambitions require bold actions, and we have committed as Hermat to donate 20% of all the proceeds from our events going forward into that foundation to play the way to support our funding of bursaries and scholarships. These scholarships were done initially through UE and will extend to other over time, as we raise that $1 million, to other schools to finance persons pursuing professional certification through SHIM. And as I said, to fund those outreach programs to encourage people to go to university to pursue HR studies. You would have heard from our panelists the tremendous opportunities ahead for organizations that require all people to contribute. You would have heard from our Minister of Labor that the future of work lies not in technology, but in people. We talk all the time about people being our greatest assets, and yet people traditionally have been the ones that get cut first when we think about growing, when we think about changing. We want to change that trajectory and invest in our people, our greatest assets, by starting the Human Capital Investment Fund. So your part is easy. It is simply to support HERMAT, come to our events, join our events, tell others about it, bring a friend or two. The second ambitious plan we have to support our growth, to grow not just the fund, but also HERMAT, because we do have important work to do both for the profession and for the nation, is to increase our membership dramatically, because that's where most of our funding comes from. So I have a second announcement that we are very, very pleased to make, which is that today we are also officially activating a new tier of membership for companies. In the past, HERMAT was designed for individuals, and so membership could only be acquired by an individual joining HERMAT. And what would happen for many companies, especially small ones, when that person left the organization, so too did their access to HERMAT. We have heard your call, especially during the pandemic, and when organizations were forced to rapidly change, organizations calling and asking for help and support, and asking if they could be a member, if they could access the training, how they could do it. And so we put a proposal to our membership earlier this year at a special general meeting, and they agreed that it was time to expand the membership tiers to include companies. And so before you leave, I'd like to encourage you to make sure you stop by our registration desk and pre-register with our secretariat to become a corporate member. The benefits are there and will redound to you and your organization and prepare you for the future. So I know we have gone way over time today. Thank you for indulgence. I have cut my speech, and I know some of you in the audience know I can go very much on and on. And so I will stop at this point. And thank you so much for staying with us, for staying the course, and we look forward to your continued support and contribution to our Human Capital Investment Fund, either by way of becoming a member and participating on our events, or by direct contributions. We know we have some high influence persons and corporate decision makers inside of there who can help us make that difference and take actions to help us reach that goal of raising $1 million in 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonia. So you see, it's more than just networking. Huh? It's about informing, educating, it's about giving back, it's about sharing collective experiences, and so much more. So of course, we are looking forward to those partnerships, either by way of you joining HERMAT or coming to our events, telling a friend, etc., etc.